So Dan, if I am going to describe something that is 120 feet tall and the canopy is 120 feet wide, and it takes 4 grown people to get your arms around it, what would you think?
Well, that's definitely our American elm tree. That's very close to James McDonald of McDonnell Douglas. You know, I've always got to put that history stuff in.
Right. What if I ask you a question? Hey, where's that Harry Potter looking tree? The one that was at Hogwarts that stomped people. What would you say?
It's the red mulberry, which I like, and then some other people do not, because it definitely shares its history as far as the way it looks. It looks like it's seen better days, but it's a bird buffet during the spring.
Yeah, and it just lost a branch that might have actually stomped somebody.
It might have, you never know.
Harry, you do realize what tree this is?
So 9,500 trees, 314 acres, but we have a botanical setting in the middle of a columbarium with a stream running it that borders 2 lakes. That's our property.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that with somebody who can really speak to that level of degree with horticulture.
We're going to dig into that in just a little while.
If you can dig it.
This is the Can You Dig It podcast. We crawl into the crypts, gardens, and forgotten cemeteries. Join Dan Fuller, your resident cemetery chronicler, and Joe Shields, the plot-loving development exec, as we unearth the dark secrets of St. Louis and Bellefontaine Cemetery and beyond. From garden geeks to history buffs with a taste for the macabre, as well as fans of iconography, this is your podcast. We love diving deep into the shadows of history. Let's dig in.
So it's my distinct pleasure today to work with Joe Shields on this particular broadcast. Joe, as you might have heard before, started out as a volunteer at Bellefontaine Cemetery and has now migrated his way into a development position, which is so instrumental and key to the preservation of our 314 acres.
And it is my distinct pleasure to work with the Cemetery Chronicler, or the historian, Dan Fuller. Dan has been an inspiration to all volunteers over the last 6 or 7 years, and is partially one of the reasons that I'm there. I met Dan on a very hot summer day in 2018, and I walked into the office, asked if I could have a volunteer application, and he didn't even bat an eye, just handed me an application from under the desk, and many years later, here I am, Director of Development.
Yep. And see, I saw you were already baked, so it was an easy apply for that.
It was a weak moment. I was dehydrated.
But you and I are not here alone today. So we have some expertise with us. So James Faupel is joining us, also a member of our staff at Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum. And I actually think he can introduce himself better as far as the vast knowledge he brings to us at the cemetery.
Welcome.
Oh, boy. I'm James Faupel. I am the new Director of Horticulture and Curator of Living Collections at Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum. And I've been working with plants for a very long time, countless years now. I've got an extended interest in native plants, and I've been working with native plants for about 17 years now. And so that's where my main focus comes into. Prior to starting at BCA just 6 months ago, I was working for the Missouri Botanical Garden for a little over 8 years.
Okay.
So great credentials, and again, a very big asset for us at the cemetery where, and I'll let him run down the numbers, but I think the most important thing, and we'll just kind of jump in with both feet, because a lot of people ask, what does it mean to be an arboretum?
And so I usually ask, if folks ask that question, I followed up with a question and ask them if they know what a botanical garden is. And they generally do.
Ask Joe, not me.
Joe, what's a botanical garden, Joe?
It's pretty flowers.
Is that it?
It's pretty flowers. It's needing to weed pretty flowers, and that's my extent of my botanical knowledge.
Yeah. So this is where we really rely on James.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So a botanical garden is much like a museum or a zoo, which a zoo is a living collection of animals. A botanical garden is a living collection of plants. And then an arboretum is specifically a living collection of trees and shrubs. So woody plant material.
And we are a level 3 arboretum.
Yes, that is correct. So we're a level 3 arboretum out of 4. And what that means is based off of the credentials required by ArbNet, ran by the Morton Arboretum out of Chicago, we meet a certain set of credentials to get us to that level, which includes a certain number of trees and shrubs in our collection, which we have over 10,000 individual trees and shrubs at BCA, which is comprised from over 550 different species and varieties of trees and shrubs. And then we also do the educational piece and the plant conservation piece, which gets us to that level 3 status out of 4.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so important is that we identify ourselves at Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum as a cultural institution, much on par with the History Museum, and in this case, the Missouri Botanical Garden, which happens not to be an accredited arboretum, I'd like to point out.
Which is interesting. Yeah, if they wanted to be, they could sign up overnight, but I'm not sure why they don't.
Yeah, well, we filled out the paperwork. I always kind of say that this is a certification that we really didn't have to study much for, because I'm going to wind the clock back to Elmer and Hotchkiss and the fact that we are the oldest garden cemetery west of the Mississippi, a concept that began at Père Lachaise, came to the New World in the form of Mount Auburn up in Boston, and then migrated here by way of Elmer and Hotchkiss, who had done an extension at Greenwood, which is in New York. And so he kind of cut his teeth there and then brought that concept here. And, I know one of the things that you're doing is investigating what the grounds used to be like, what was there, again, in your own interest, the native plant material. Mm-hmm. And I know you've got some great ideas about some of the stuff that we'll do, which includes native prairies and focusing on that. But as a cemetery, we get to play with those ornamentals too.
Oh, yeah. No, there's a lot of potential. A lot of untapped potential at BCA, and that's what drew me to it. A lot of ways that we can kind of grow as an arboretum and as a botanical garden space.
Is that a ba-dum bump, as we grow?
Exactly.
Since you've been at BCA and you've got your teeth cut, what's the most impressive to you? What were you surprised when you kind of walked in the gates? And
well, back when I was going through horticulture school, I was first introduced to the cemetery and arboretum. And at that point in time, it actually wasn't an arboretum. The arboretum accreditation's only been around for about 10 years, correct?
Correct.
So at that point in time, my professor was just introducing us to the space because there's this beautiful tree collection that was kind of like unknown, unrecognized in the St. Louis area to many in like the horticulture trade. And going there, I was just like, oohing and eyeing over the landscape, over these big, beautiful trees, this, wonderful tree collection here in St. Louis that, like, people don't really know about. Many people know about, like, the tree collection at Forest Park and at Tower Grove Park, but BCA's actually dwarfs those. Mm-hmm. So the fact that, people really don't understand, what's at their fingertips there is what shocked me back then. Since coming to BCA, I don't think at any point in time I was visiting BCA and explored like the formal garden areas in Wildwood Valley Garden. I had been to BCA multiple times to go see the reconstructed prairie on the backside of the property.
Correct.
But I don't think I ever, in that gap period, went and explored Wildwood Valley, which is sad because it's probably one of the most beautiful formal garden spaces in the St. Louis area.
So now I put you on the spot. Can you describe it for our listeners?
Yeah, no, Wildwood Valley, it is dual purposes. So it is obviously a big, beautiful garden space with very intriguing architecture, but it is meant to be a spot of many different burial types. Or what would you call them? Funerary
options.
Types? Yeah.
Burial options.
Yeah. So with that in mind, it was designed to be able to house garden burials, green burials, different types of ways to have cremations, placed. So, a lot of different options in that space. And then, so how do you combine all that in a beautiful garden space and not make it to where that's like in your face?
Right.
And make it a spot for peaceful retreat for people. So the landscape architect, and who designed that?
Herb Shaw.
Herb Shaw. I can not remember that for some reason.
That's what I'm here for. I'm always the answer guy.
But so Herb, wonderful design aspects on that from when you come in the main entrance point, as long as you're not coming in by the columbarium. If you're coming at the upper lake side, he included a beautiful overlook just looking down the stream that crisscrosses the paths, because the paths are very windy throughout the garden. And so you just get this wonderful view down to the columbarium. And then if you go down to the columbarium, or on your way to the columbarium, you have another viewpoint. So the second of 3 that looks back up, and a wonderful viewpoint there. Then once you get right beyond the columbarium, you have the final overlook space, which is all 3 are kind of gathering spaces. And that one then overlooks the lower lake and the Cascade Mausoleum. So he was very much, had plenty of thoughts of like how to design this and really like enjoy the space. How you can view the whole area. And then placing those 3 main viewpoints was just like fantastic idea. Like
I call them the Kodak moments.
Yeah, exactly. Like just wonderful design aesthetic there. And then for the people who are coming to like mourn their loved ones and coming there to, find peace, the whole overlaid design is to have the pathway to where you never see the full pathway, much like how Elmer designed the entire landscape of the cemetery, to where the roads kind of died and dove behind hills or in valleys. Same thing that he did there, that Herb did, in designing it to where you're never going to probably see many people on the path. So if there's a group of people on the path and then 15, 20 feet in front of you, you might not even see them or notice them, especially with the sound of the stream coming through. And then he created lots of little pockets and spaces where you can sit and relax and find closure. And the plantings in those areas even kind of help enclose. And so he designed in the perfect plantings to fit those specific ideas that he had for the space.
I call those little nodes. So everybody can find their own little space. And I know that when people come out, they do that. They have their favorite little spot. And I know that we're going through some, I'll call it redevelopment. I don't want to call it a reorder of it. But part of Wildwood Valley is stronger than the other, and we're strengthening that other side. So I think there'll be new nodes and new places to hide out. Now I'm going to really jump in with both feet from the standpoint of, I know that right now the trees that are there are immature, they're growing, and so as they mature they'll become more shaded. So right now all that plant material has to be able to take quite a bit of direct sunlight, but over time I know you and your staff are going to have to trade that out to things that are more shade oriented. What kind of a challenge is that?
The challenge with that, it's a progressive one. Like, some of those trees are slower growing than others. The area probably right around the columbarium is going to be the area that's the most challenging, because a good chunk of the day, the way that area faces, it gets pretty shaded in the morning and then direct sun exposure in the afternoon. And so that can be pretty tough for plants. Finding plants that can tolerate that kind of, switch in lighting. And at least plants that can work in a formal setting like this. But as our team does, is we just start filling in the gaps as they start showing up, trying to make it a very seamless
It's kind of like a painting that you're constantly adding and adjusting.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the color palette. I find that kind of interesting as far as the attempt to keep things a little bit more on the muted side. When we think of gardens, we think of these bright bops of color, but that's not necessarily the case at a cemetery.
Yeah. So in that garden space, directly, we're trying to keep things on the more neutral side of things. So never too bright of colors, not big bright oranges, bright reds and yellows, things like that. Trying to keep it more to the more muted tones for sure.
Yeah, for reflection.
So James, if I could take us back even further for the listeners who don't know you, if you could tell us, when did you become interested in horticulture, or when did you notice that you had a green thumb?
Well, green thumb didn't happen until I finally moved out of my parents' house, back in the very, very early 20s. But to that point, my dad was probably one of my biggest inspirations with having a love of nature. Go out hiking, fishing, all those kinds of things, go camping. He was a big fan of nature, and he just instilled that into me and all my siblings, truthfully. And so then once I got out of high school, I skipped college. I went straight into construction. I had some friends that were in construction. They were making good paychecks already. My friends in college were scraping by, and I was like, you know what? That sounds fine. My buddy's saying this is a really good idea. After about 5 years of construction, and I had a wife and kid at that point, I was like, you know what? I don't think this was the right choice.
Hey, we all, go down pathways we have to pick up. So,
but with that, like once I started, I had my own place, I had my wife, my daughter, having the ability to start growing things for myself in my own space. I was like, I really want to do something working outdoors. What is available to me to maybe take night classes while I work full time? And I saw St. Louis Community College had their program at Merrimack, the horticulture program, and I decided to go just test it out. And my first professor there that taught Hort 101, the intro to botany, just sucked me in. He was a super passionate guy, loved trees and shrubs. So trees and shrubs is actually one of the first things that I really dove into. And then the professor that kind of really did it all for me was Dave Telka. He was a former wildlife biologist for the Missouri Department of Conservation here in St. Louis. And he introduced me to native plants and what that meant, and the incredible value to having native plants in the landscape. And that just blew me away that I had gone for 25 years of my life not even knowing what a native plant was. And those are the plants that exist around us naturally.
Right.
And it's like, well, why are we using these exotic plants that aren't serving any ecological purpose in our landscape when this is what's supporting all this wonderful, beautiful wildlife that everybody seems to enjoy.
Right.
And it's so that kind of was the light bulb moment for me for native plants. And that kind of drove me really down the road of horticulture.
I had a similar moment in 2017. I was on a tour with a horticulturist who explained to me that American elm trees in the root system would pass nutrients to each other. And I had never known anything about that in depth with trees, and a light bulb just went on. Prior to that, Dan, it was just history. 100% history, horticulture. I really had no passion for it, but now it's at least 50-50. Yeah. And what you and your team do for the cemetery is amazing. Dan and I talk about in previous episodes about St. Louis being a city of firsts, things pioneered here. And I know we are very proud, all three of us, that Bellefontaine is the first level 3 Arboretum in the state of Missouri, first level 3 Arboretum in the city of St. Louis, and, what we're entrusted with going forward.
Right. And what that means for the environment. It's that 314-acre green space that, back to what James said, is the most people don't know about it. And yet we're closer to the flyway since we're so close to the Mississippi. So we have those birds. And then with what James and his crew has been doing, leaving those dead trees that we call nature trees and the increase in the number of red-headed woodpeckers that we've seen. All of this just dovetails together, and it is so BCA.
So, James, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to ask you a couple questions about the number of trees in the cemetery, what types of trees we have in the cemetery, and what makes an arboretum tick.
In today's fast-paced digital world, where every message competes for attention, how do you ensure your voice stands out above the noise? Introducing EG Media Group, your ultimate destination for cutting-edge content creation. Our expert team specializes in crafting captivating videos and engaging podcasts that leave a lasting impression on your audience. But we're more than just content creators. Are you an aspiring author? Let EG Media Group be your guide through the publishing process, from editing to cover design. Imagine your manuscript transformed into a masterpiece, ready to connect with readers around the world. Don't just write your book. Launch it strategically with EG Media Group as your partner in author success. Visit egmediagroup.com today for a free consultation and turn your dream into reality. That's egmediagroup.com. EG Media Group. Create, connect, convert.
So we are back, and thank you for continuing to listen to the You Can Dig It podcast. And again, it is my distinct pleasure to be sitting here with Dan Fuller, Cemetery Chronicler, and James Faupel, Director of Horticulture and Curator of Living Collections.
I love that living collections thing at the cemetery.
That's pretty fancy. My title's not that cool.
Nowhere near as really put some life back in the place.
Yeah. So, James, for the listener who isn't really horticulture savvy or really not familiar with what an arboretum is, even though you just explained it, do you have a long-range plan, short-range plan for what types of trees that you want to introduce to the cemetery, and if you could also explain to our listeners what rare trees we have on property and how that works.
Sure. So when it comes to the future stuff, let's pause on that, and I'll talk about the current stuff that we have. The current plants that we have, massive collection of over 550 species and varieties of trees. With that, many native trees and many exotic trees. It's a very old collection at this point. Even though the Arboretum is only 10 years old, the cemetery itself is 175 years old at this point in time. We actually have some trees on site that are massive and likely older than the cemetery itself, which is incredible to have.
Right.
We have this wonderful example of a sassafras, which I hope is able to make it through and not get laurel wilt, which is coming through the region.
That sounds like a detailed question we'll have to get back into.
Yeah. But then, so, we have these gorgeous, big old massive trees, some which are former state champion trees, which now the state champion tree program is defunct, which the Missouri Department of Conservation used to manage and promote. And so they're hoping that somebody will be able to pick that up sometime soon, and we'll maybe be able to start measuring our trees again and resubmit.
We should pick that up.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to declare all of our trees are state champions.
I mean, if the first ones on the list for all of them, somebody has to then beat them. But then, rare tree-wise, we do have some really cool, unique plants that are more like the conservation concern. Similar to what I just mentioned, that we have the laurel wilt blight that might come through and damage sassafras and spice bushes, things like that. We've had these many different types of diseases and fungi and things and insects that have come through, usually exotic species that have been introduced to the continent that are, damaging trees. And now we have specimens of those that are still hanging on. So our former state champion American elm tree, that we have treated for
Dutch elm.
Yeah, for the Dutch elm disease. And that, so we're trying to keep those alive. We're also treating a wide variety of our collection of ash trees to prevent the emerald ash borers from coming in and damaging those, so that we have some living specimens of those to be able to show the public.
And that's part of the Arboretum aspect, too. It's not just the trees, it's that outreach and that basically investigation and planning and making sure that the information that we gather and collect at the cemetery that we can share to the general public. I know that's especially true with the ash trees, because we intentionally culled many of them about 5-6 years ago so that we could focus treatment on the small, middle, and large we decided to keep.
Yeah. And then kind of along those lines, a long time ago, the chestnut blight came through North America. And so we have very few American chestnuts or Ozark chestnuts, which are native to Missouri, left out in the wild. And so at BCA, we actually have some specimens of those two trees. They are the type that still get infected by that blight, unfortunately. But what ends up happening is they start resprouting, and so we have almost like shrubs of these trees.
Right.
And so it's important for us to have that in our collection for people to be able to go out, see for that educational purpose, to understand that.
Well, I know we have a unique collection, too, that was gifted to us by former Governor Christopher Kit Bond. And so we have this collection, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong,
the Chinese.
It's the Chinese and an American hybrid.
Oh, yeah. So they have hybridized some of the Americans with the Chinese, which are blight resistant. But, still it's not like the straight species. So
straight bourbon versus with a little water.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a little bit watered down genetics, but it's at least holding the genetics around should something happen to the shrubby versions even, right. So it's good to have different types of backup plans, which that hybridization is a backup plan. And then we also have other rare species collections at BCA, and they're not necessarily because of those types of situations. It's more of like habitat loss, or because they're just very rare in the wild to begin with. So we have a few different types of oaks, like the Arkansas oak and the maple leaf oak, which are, the maple leaf oak is an endangered species. The Arkansas oak is a species of conservation concern. And both of those are restricted to very small areas of Arkansas. Right. So
one of my favorites, because it's history, is the Franklinia.
Yeah.
So you can tell them a little bit about what a Franklinia is?
Yeah, so the Franklinia tree is a tree that was discovered in eastern North America by,
a horticulturalist.
It was, botanist, it was Bartlett, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's right. But I am, blanking on his name, but went out, discovered this tree. It's an understory flowering tree, much like a dogwood, if most people are familiar with dogwoods. So it's this very showy, big white flower understory tree from the eastern North America. It's a natural range when the European civilization happened in North America was very tiny. However, nobody knew about this tree, and as this area started to get populated, as these botanists go through, they discovered this plant and that its population was already shrinking. And so then, took that back to the botanical gardens where he was at, which I believe is up in Delaware, and, was housing those. And then, over time, botanists wanted to go back and check this out and find where these plants where they were discovered in the wild. And now the tree is completely gone
from nature.
Yeah. So very small natural range to begin with. And now just because of urbanization and our destruction of habitat, they are now lost to time. And now they still exist, but it's only in cultivation. There's a lot of horticulturists and botanists are still hopeful that it still exists in the wild.
They just haven't found it.
But maybe on private property, because pretty much the area where it was found is just not public land. So it's all privately held land, and the people who do hold some of that land and they have allowed people to go and explore it, they've not found the tree on those pieces of property. So it's possible it still exists on somebody's private property.
Yeah. I love this merger of history and horticulture. And again, much like what you said, didn't really think about it when I first got to Bellefontaine Cemetery. But now that I've been exposed to the horticulture side, it's a perfect marriage.
It is.
Another tree that I'm enamored with and talk a lot about, and I know this goes back to your friend Dan Billman, is our large leaf magnolias.
Yeah, the large leaf magnolias are a really cool southeastern tree. So they really shouldn't be able to necessarily grow in the St. Louis area. There are ranges to the southeast. You would think that maybe the climate here would be detrimental to them. It can if you have a very young plant. It seems like it can set them back at a very young age. But once they get established, they seem to do well as long as they're kind of somewhat protected. We have a lot of trees surrounding the vicinity, so it's a much more like a woodland situation where the trees are established. So the wind isn't as high in those spaces, but
because those leaves are big.
Yes, it's one of the biggest leaves it might actually be the biggest leaf in North America, but they're very large leaves.
So for those, again, not where we are, and I'm spreading my hands, that's 15 to 18 inches.
Oh yeah, they're
big
massive.
leaf.
They look very tropical. Of course, coming from the southeast, they'll start blending into that kind of environment. But here in St. Louis, compared to our flora, very tropical looking. Yeah. One of the types of big leaf magnolias, because that's Magnolia macrophylla. There's also Magnolia macrophylla variety Ashii, which we have on site, and that is another rare tree that we have that's able to grow here. That is an endemic plant to the panhandle of Florida. Endemic means that's that's small. So the Franklinia, it was endemic to this one valley. Right. This magnolia is endemic to the panhandle of Florida, and the fact that it can survive here.
Yeah, and again, because it is a collection, it is, and to a certain extent, an archive, which is right down my pathway. So people can see these and, spread their interest and put some focus on them and try and explain what emerald ash borer is and how we might confront that in the future. So this is a really important part of our community, and as I think everybody here will identify, very overlooked for us because we have word cemetery in our name.
So James, what would we tell a family if they wanted to memorialize their loved ones with a tree or a species that would be detrimental to the environment or maybe even invasive? What species would you say we could not have because they're invasive?
Well, yeah. So the invasive species are definitely something that we're trying to rule out at this point in time going forward at the Arboretum. We do have a few species which would probably be classified as invasive species, unfortunately. We will not be replanting those. A lot of those will be slated for removal should the ability come around. But so if a family actually asked for an invasive species, let's say tree of heaven, it's a urban invasive species here in our area, I'd try to have a nice conversation with them to explain the detriment that can cause to our local environments and try to give them an option that would be suitable in replacement thereof. something that would maybe look very similar to, or maybe if it was a tree, if the reason they were asking because it was a tree that had a personal connection to them, try and maybe find an alternate tree that was that kind of connection
suitable
for the family.
substitution.
Yeah.
And again, I think this comes back a lot of times to they're trying to memorialize like a granite marker, and we want something that's going to last the test of time. And so there are certain trees, especially like this tree of heaven. I know it's very susceptible to storms ripping and tearing apart. So, I mean, we're really trying to guide them in a way for something that's going to last a long period of time. And then that's where we get into our friends in the front office that can set up endowments so that when that tree does come to an end 150 years from now, that there would be the way to replace it. So it's kind of right down in our wheelhouse.
Gentlemen, look what we get to be a part of every day. It's humbling to me to go on the property every day and know that our first two superintendents are there. Almerlin Hotchkiss and his son Frank, that's 50 plus years of leadership right there.
I got news for you. Out of our 7 superintendents, 6 of them are there.
Right. And then on the horticulture side of things, we have giants in the industry. William Trelease, James Gurney,
George Engelman,
that we are in the presence of every day. And it's something for me to keep in the forefront of my mind as a steward of, how to take care of the property going forward, and the awesome respect and the responsibility that is on a daily basis. And I get to do it with you two guys, which is outstanding.
And I will have to say, James has an awesome staff with him too.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
That's a big job, 314 acres and 10,000 trees. And for you that have 5 trees at home and you know what it's like picking up branches, come help us.
Yeah.
And speaking of botanists, I actually remembered the Frank Linea botanist. It's Charles Bartram.
There we go.
That's what I was going to say.
Yep.
It's Charles Bartram. James, you answered the first part of my question, and I want to give you an opportunity to answer the second part.
Yeah, about looking into the future for the Arboretum.
Yes, sir.
And its tree collection. Well, how I envision it, trying to do many faceted things with certain projects. So trying to hit multiple goals. If we wanted to move a lot farther into plant conservation, there's so many great ways that we can do that here locally at home in our state. And that is by trying to get together a collection of all the trees and shrubs that grow within Missouri. And so many species which are rare of concern. And, it would be a really cool project to start that and include a lot of the other arboretums that are in the area. So a partnership program, trying to grow on these trees, work in collaboration, going out searching for these plants in the wild, getting seed material, bringing them back, trying to grow them on, sharing the plant material between all the different arboretums. I think would be a really cool way to try and target that. Some of our staff have also brought up the idea of doing kind of a genetics program, in the sense of how we mentioned, we have these really old historical trees and state champion trees, working with others around the state to try and get genetics and clone those plants or get seed material from those plants. So either trying to take grafting material from them or get their progeny and trying to grow that on and trying to have those within the collection and be able to share those to other arboretums as well.
It's kind of like tried and true, and so we might as well spread those good genes.
Yeah, so kind of like a champion, program of growing them on. So I think that would be a really cool idea too. And then just in the way of plant conservation as a whole, I would really love to be able to grow, and that's what would get us into that level 4 status, would be pushing into plant conservation, really having that more scientific staff looking into the research ability, going out into the wild, going to other states, collecting these rare species, bringing it back here and working with other organizations like Missouri Botanical Garden, Morton Arboretum, and such.
Yeah, and we're so close to those entities.
We are, and I love the relationships that we have with the other cultural institutions in the city.
Yeah, Missouri Botanical Garden, this is where I got to drop a little history. Henry himself was going to be buried at Bellefontaine before he decided to be at the Botanical Garden. So William Trelease, George Engelman, who we already mentioned, are very key individuals in the Missouri Botanical Garden. So we have kind of this symbiotic relationship going on with them. And one of the things we want to explore from a history standpoint is somebody else who's with us was the superintendent for Tower Grove Park. The Gurney family is with us for 3 generations, and that's another person who's really grafted in the tree aspect, because it said that he probably had a hand in planting all the original trees in Tower Grove Park.
Well, and kind of much like how Morton Arboretum runs the ArbNet accreditation program, and they're kind of like overseeing all of this arboretum work across the world, not just in North America. They're helping like that work. Us being the first level 3 arboretum in the state, I don't see any reason why we can't be that mentor to a lot of the other arboretums in the area, where we can't start some of this kind of programming and kind of manage and work with them and have our own network in this way, where they're coming to us and working with us, us sharing our knowledge and experience with them.
It'd be a really strong triad at this particular point, because we do have Tower Grove Park at a level 2, and then the Danforth campus of Washington University is now a level 3, but we did beat them out on
and
that.
Forest Park this year just became a level 2.
Yeah.
Level 2, and that's where we are today.
And, my role takes me to the Capitol every January for the beginning of the legislative session, and this conversation has spurred me to try to lobby for me to take over that state champion tree program. So by maybe this time next year, all state champion trees will be on our property. Just saying. I can dig it.
So, I brought in before that Père Lachaise was the first of the garden cemeteries. Mount Auburn in Boston was the first one here in North America. And that's kind of the benchmark for the garden cemeteries. And I know we look at them a lot and kind of helps us guide where we're going to go to. So there's quite a few of the historic cemeteries that, if they have not already secured Arboretum status in some way, shape, or form, they're going that direction. So back to what you said, making this strong alliance with those cultural institutions in St. Louis at one level, but then again, some of those historic cemeteries. And I think that's some future talks we could have if we get a few of our friends who are kind of in the same boat that you are and see what they're doing, so we can maybe dovetail in with them.
Guys, I can tell you just from traveling to these cemeteries in the last 3 years that the other historic cemeteries that are in our realm, they are aggressively chasing Arboretum status, either on a level 1, 2, or 3.
Right. So we might as well take the lead, because, as James said, we got there first.
Yeah.
Now, I really appreciate James taking some time, because he is very busy at the cemetery. So to break him away and have him chat with us in this wonderful setting here at Forest Park, as we've just identified yet another arboretum, and explain to our listeners what an arboretum is, and hopefully that takes away some of the mystery. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, James, thank you for bringing your passion on a daily basis, your dedication, the inspiration that you bring to the cemetery. It's just tangible. You can see it as soon as you go through the front gate. So thank you.
I appreciate that.
You're talking about the mums.
Thanks for listening to the podcast, and please share this episode with your family and friends. If you got value from the episode as well as the podcast, you can do it right from the platform you are listening on. Take a screenshot and tag us and tag yourself. We are at Podcast Can You Dig It on Instagram.